I'm Tabby.
And I'm Caitlin, and today we will be discussing It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey.
And I'm actually officially Tabby Warden now, so just wanted to throw that out there.
We are officially sisters. It's legal. There's a contract. It's binding.
There's a social security card in the mail on its way here.
You guys, it was a beautiful wedding. It was an
It was
interesting
really
reception.
nice.
It could have been written about in the news. It was that fun.
So good.
Anyways, so we're gonna kick off this first part of the episode with the synopsis. And I'm actually gonna start by reading the back of the book. And by the way, cover art, so cute.
Tessa Bailey does the best cartoon character cover art.
They're so cute. I love them so much.
Brendan, you look like a freaking babe.
He is a little babe. And Miss Piper looking all cute. Okay,
Queen.
so Piper Bellinger is fashionable and influential, and her reputation as a wild child means the paparazzi are constantly on her heels. When too much champagne and an out-of-control rooftop party land Piper in the slammer, her stepfather decides enough is enough. So he cuts her off and sends her and her sister to learn some responsibility running their late father's dive bar in Westport, Washington. Piper hasn't even been in Westport 5 minutes when she meets big, bearded sea captain Brendan Taggart, who thinks she won't last a week outside of Beverly Hills. So what if Piper can't do math and the idea of sleeping in a shabby apartment with bunk beds gives her hives? How bad could it really be? She's determined to show her stepfather and the hot, grumpy local that she's more than just a pretty face. Except it's a small town, and everywhere she turns, she bumps into Brendan. The fun-loving socialite and the gruff fisherman are polar opposites, but there's an undeniable attraction simmering between them. Piper doesn't want any distractions, especially feelings for a man who sails off into the sunset for weeks at a time. Yet, as she reconnects with her past and begins to feel at home in Westport, Piper starts to wonder if the cold, glamorous life she knew is what she truly wants. LA is calling her name, but Brendan, in this town full of memories, may have already caught her heart.
Oh,
wow. Wow.
Wow. It's really good. Tessa Bailey, you've done it again. So we'll start off with the synopsis. So we always like to do this ahead of time. That way, if you haven't read the book, we will read it for you. But you should read the book because it's very good. We don't do it justice. The local legend, Piper Bellinger, is dumped by her boyfriend, so she does what any rational person would do. She breaks into a fancy hotel pool and throws a rager. Piper gets arrested, and the photos of the event go viral. Her sister Hannah bails her out of jail, even though her stepfather told her not to. And her ex-boyfriend, he was a real douche, first of all. He was real mean.
Yeah, Piper has a history of dating jerks, for sure. And this was her longest relationship, and it was only 3 weeks.
It was 3 weeks long. Good for you, girl.
Good for you. We're proud of you. So their stepfather, who is a super successful and rich movie producer, scolds them for their behavior. The owner of the hotel is actually financing his next film, so he's pretty mad with how Piper behaved. And in order to make amends, he plans to send Piper to Westport for 3 months. Westport is a tiny fishing town where the girls and their mother are from, but Piper has literally not been there since she was 4 years old. They still own a bar in that town, an old dive bar, and it has a little apartment upstairs. So he's like, that's where you're going to live for the summer. And Hannah doesn't want Piper to go alone, so she insists on putting her own career in the film industry on hold to join her for the summer.
The sisters arrive in Westport to find a bunch of local fishermen hanging out in a bar that they own. And Brendan, the beloved local and captain of the Del Rey, is confused why these women are here dressed in their LA fashion. The sisters explain that Henry Cross, who owned the bar prior to that, is their father, and they are staying in his old apartment for the summer. Brendan is surprised and a little bit annoyed. Henry Cross is a Westport hero, and he used to captain the same fishing boat as Brendan until he was lost at sea. He doesn't like the fact that these city girls are here to mess with his routine and the Cross legacy. He shows them upstairs to a cobweb and mouse-infested studio apartment, and Piper can tell that Brendan is daring them to stay there, so she stubbornly pretends to like the apartment and says that it is perfect.
That's what I would do. I'd be like, I love it.
It's great.
Perfect, perfect, perfect. So the next day, Brendan's grocery shopping and he overhears Piper asking Siri on her phone for recipes that only need like 2 ingredients. And so he's like, hey, I didn't think you'd last it through the night. And Brendan informs her that she actually has other family in town and there's a memorial for her father near the harbor. And Piper's a bit nervous about learning more about this because she was so young when her father passed away that she doesn't have any memories of him. Well, she doesn't have many memories of him. And she's like worried that it could like stir up something super emotional in her. And then Piper also awkwardly learns that Brendan is widowed because she like, I don't know,
Sees
he
his
was
wedding
being a
ring.
jerk. Yeah. And so he's wearing a wedding ring. She's like, oh, your wife must have to put up with so much from you. And he's like past tense. Yep, she put up with a lot. And she's like, oh, is she not with us anymore?
Oh, she passed on?
And it's really awkward. But anyway, he ends up helping her pick out some groceries.
Very nice of him to do. Thanks, Brendan. I feel like I'm dying. I have a very bad sinus infection, y'all. Bear with me.
Oh, no.
So later, the sisters visit Henry's memorial together. They both feel guilty because it doesn't stir up any emotions for them. When they return to the bar, they find a man named Mick waiting to meet with them. He explains that he was a close friend of their father, and they also learn that he is Desiree's father and that Desiree is the late wife of Brendan. Mick gives them Opal's address in case they want to visit, and Piper's like, yeah, we know Opal, for sure. Love to see her.
Yeah, I absolutely know who that is, but they don't. They're lying. So Piper and Hannah have been cleaning up the apartment, and Piper attempts to make dinner for them. Hannah accidentally left a rag soaked in Pine Sol near the stove, so it catches on fire. Piper throws it into the pan, and runs the flaming pan outside because she's a smart thinker. She's so
She's
smart.
quick on her feet.
Yeah, because also there's a bunch of grease in the pan, so she's like, no water. Our intelligent queen. So meanwhile, across the street, Brendan is meeting his friend Fox for dinner at a restaurant. And Fox has a little bit of a reputation as a womanizer. He's known for spending his weekends in Seattle having casual hookups. And Fox keeps teasing Brendan because he's looking out the window over at Piper's bar.
So, next thing they know, Brendan sees Piper run out into the street with a flaming pan and immediately jumps into action. And Brendan puts the flames out for her and asks if she is okay. She tells him that she's fine, and he gets mad at her for being unsafe because makes sense. It's a man thing to do.
It is a man thing to do.
Hannah steps in and is like, back the fuck up. And she's doing really great, and you're being a bully. She's trying her best. And so Brendan apologizes and asks to take Piper back to the restaurant to eat. So Piper tells Hannah that she will bring some takeout back for her. And Fox offers to show Hannah a record store in town because she's a big music enthusiast. Brendan and Piper bond over dinner, and she hints at wanting to go out on his boat with him. And he gets super nervous and doesn't officially ask her out.
Yeah, he's like, oh shit, was that my chance? My bad.
My bad.
So the next morning, though, he's going on like a 3-day fishing trip. So he stops by before he leaves and changes the locks on the bar and the apartment for the sisters. And they're like, okay, thank you. Weird because they didn't ask for it. But
Are you gonna kill us?
They're like, wait, do you have a key? Because I don't know if I'm comfortable with that. He goes out on the boat for their trip and he makes an Instagram account specifically to be able to look at Piper's photos. And then he accidentally follows her. And so the crew is like, oh my God, you boomer, you just fucked up. And he's like, damn, that's embarrassing.
It's like, oh no.
But it's low-key cute.
It's really cute. That's very sweet of him to do. Kind of creepy though. He's like
kind of creepy because
totally getting into these photos on Instagram.
She's like got some sexy photos on there. She's an influencer.
So Piper returns to her apartment to find an old man waiting for her, and he explains that Brendan left him a note saying that she needs padding installed under the top bunk because she keeps smacking her head on it. So before Brendan came to change the lock, she totally like swung her head up and just gave herself a giant goose egg on her forehead. And the man asks if she's gone to see Opal yet, and she's like, oh yeah, that's the second time someone's mentioned her. So yes, I will totally go do that. So she also agrees to walk with him in the mornings so that his daughter, who is really busy, like doesn't have to do it. Nope, sorry, I read that wrong. She also agrees to walk with him in the mornings because his daughter is busy since he has trouble climbing the stairs by himself. So
Anyway,
he has trouble getting around because he is old, and usually his daughter walks him to the museum, and he asked her on the mornings his daughter is busy to walk him instead.
that's it. That's the one.
That's the one.
And so she's like, yeah. And by the way, I did forget to mention, this old man's name is Abe, and we love Abe.
He's really cute.
So later, Piper's like, we probably should go visit Opal. So she shows up at this address that Mick gave her, and Opal's like, oh, yeah, so I'm actually your grandmother. I'm Henry's mom. And Piper can tell just by looking around her apartment, she has been living as a shut-in, like she has not been leaving to hang out with people. And so she offers to get her dolled up, and says that they should go out sometime. So she gives her a little makeover. And then Piper goes home to tell Hannah about Opal, and they call their mother. They're like, what the fuck? Their mom is like, my bad. It's just that Opal is really stubborn and saw us leaving Westport as a betrayal. And so I just didn't mention the fact that you have a grandmother. Sorry. And so the sisters are like, what we're going to do is we're going to fix up this old bar as a way to honor Henry and feel closer to the memory of him. And then they also see it as a way to prove to their stepfather that they have grown and can potentially like come home early, like earlier than he was wanting them to come home.
Because they're really responsible.
Uh-huh.
So Brendan returns to Westport, and Mick calls him to remind him about the memorial for Desiree. Brendan assures him that he will be there. And at the memorial, Fox tells Brendan that Desiree wouldn't want Brendan to be living his life this way, and that they really should stop doing this because it's very sad, and she's been gone for a very long time. And so Brendan's also just super scared to move on. That's why he continues to wear his wedding ring. He doesn't want to betray his wife in any way. But then Piper arrives with a tray just full of shots because she mistakenly thought she had been invited to a party, a potluck, because that is low-key how Mick had described it. He did not say it was a fucking shrine for his dead daughter,
100%.
To be completely fair.
Yeah.
So not her fault. So yeah, she did not know it was a memorial for one of Westport's most beloved locals, and Piper is mortified, as she should be, and runs out. So Brendan chases after her. I got secondhand embarrassment from this whole scene.
It's real embarrassing.
Died.
So Brendan walks out. He's like, hey, Al, it's okay. He's explaining that, look, 7 years have gone by. It used to be really hard. But at this point, I do just kind of feel obligated to be here for Mick because it feels like I would be betraying him if I didn't come. And so Piper's like, well, that's funny. Yeah, my longest relationship was 3 weeks. And she also confronts him about following her on Instagram. And he's like, haha, yeah, my bad. And he's like, I gotta ask though, are you more like yourself in the photos on your Instagram or how you are right here in front of me? And she explains to him that she is both versions of herself. Before parting ways for the night, Brendan admits to her that he does have feelings for her that go a little beyond friendship. And when he goes home, he finally takes off his wedding band.
He's like, wow, I've known this girl for 5 days, and I'm ready to risk it all.
He's like, oh, she's smoking.
My dead wife whom? So as the sisters begin their work on the bar, Brendan shows up to help just out of the blue. And they begin openly flirting with each other as the week goes on. And he asks her out, but she is conflicted because she plans to return to LA at the end of summer and doesn't want him to get the wrong idea. They also have this very exciting makeout scene at the end of the week. And he is like, I'm going to fucking kiss you. And we're like, cool. Love that. So
under the pergola that he built.
Under the pergola that he built with his bare hands. What a man.
We love that.
Piper goes to his place for dinner, and they end up having some very... they didn't actually have sex, but...
They had oral sex.
Yeah, but they got it on for sure.
Oh, yeah. There were definitely orgasms involved.
Yeah, for sure, on both parties. So Brendan is about to leave on a fishing trip for 2 weeks, so he gives Piper his house key in case she and Hannah need to go there for any reason, which, again, you don't know this lady, so...
Yeah, I didn't understand what he was getting at, but
That's very kind of him, I suppose.
don't worry, Piper does end up using it. So 13 days later, a big storm starts up. So Hannah's been working at the local record store that Fox brought her to, and Piper calls to let her know that she should stay put because the storm's picking up. It's super dangerous. But what does Piper do? She fucking runs through the storm to Brendan's house because she's like worried for Brendan's safety, who's out at sea, and she just wants to feel close to him. I don't know. It's kind of weird.
Maybe if I smell his things, like he'll be
Yeah,
safe.
she's like, I want to put on his shirt and sleep in his bed. And so she does. And the next morning, Hannah calls to let Piper know that there was an accident on the Della Ray.
Wow, foreshadowing.
Mm-hmm.
Crazy. So Piper races to the hospital in Brendan's truck to go see this man she doesn't know and is relieved to find that he is A-okay. The other guy, no, he's not fine, but it's okay. Sanders.
But he's expected to recover.
Yeah, he is in the ICU, but he's expected to make a full recovery. And she's like, oh, cool. I was totally here for Sanders. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the two of them sneak off to an empty room in Caitlin's words to go fuck like a couple of horny teenagers.
Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong. And then they leave to get information on Sanders, end up running into Mick, and Mick is like very upset when he sees that they're holding hands and that Brendan isn't wearing his wedding band. He's like, hey man, how dare you cheat on my daughter who's been dead for 7 years?
Yeah, you definitely wish that they'd had a chance to discuss it before.
Like just absolutely banging in an abandoned wing of a hospital.
I honestly, as a healthcare
I was shook.
I was appalled.
Can you imagine?
I cannot. There's nothing sexy about a hospital, least of all the ICU.
The ICU people, Kim, people are dying.
Literally, yes, fucking exactly. There's people dying. So Piper gets home to Hannah and voices her fear of falling for Brendan and getting stuck in Westport. At the same time, Opal texts Piper and she's like, I'm ready to hit the town. I would like to go out with you tonight. So they do. They go out to another local bar called Blow the Man Down. And Opal reunites with some of her old friends, which is really sweet. And they're super glad to see her again and immediately welcome her back into their group. Piper gets very drunk. And all the local ladies are like asking her for fashion advice and beauty advice. And she's like, oh, yes, I'm having the best time of my life.
Yeah, she was in actual heaven.
She was having a great time and bonding with all the local ladies. It was very sweet.
Yes. And so Brendan comes to pick her up because he's like standing there watching and he's like, oh my God, like I can imagine doing this every day for the rest of my life. And she drunkenly admits all of her insecurities to him about how she feels like she doesn't fit in and that she's not good enough for him. And he tells her that they will talk about it when she sobers up. And she's like, I am sober. He's like, you're absolutely not.
She's like, actually, I want to have sex.
No, ma'am. So the next day, Brendan takes Piper out on the Della Ray. And when they're out on the water, Brendan explains how things work on the boat and discusses the guilt that he's harbored about his wife's passing. So he's like, here's the engine room. I do have a lot of remorse about the way my wife passed away. Moving on.
Anyway. Do you want to see my bed?
Here's my bunk. Then he brings up Piper's return to LA, but she doesn't want to talk about it in the moment. She's like, no, like we're in the moment together. Why would we talk about that? And things start heating up and they end up having sex on Brendan's little tiny bunk in his cabin where he admitted to jerking off to her.
Tiny little sad bunk. So later, Brendan goes to Fox's apartment to talk through his feelings for Piper. He's like, you know women, like, what do they want? And Fox is like, well, it depends on the woman. But for example, he's like, I know Hannah really liked it when I took her to that record store. So like, do something thoughtful. Like, I don't know, there's a record expo in Seattle. I looked it up like casually and no big deal. Anyway, we're just friends. And he's like, yeah, ignoring that. So Piper calls Brendan and asks if they can use his truck to go pick up a chandelier. And Brendan's like, yeah, why don't we pick that up and then keep driving to Seattle? He's like, Fox is going to this record expo and like you and Hannah could come and we could all have a good time.
And Fox will also be there.
Absolutely. Yeah, Fox will be there.
Make sure to pass it to Hannah. Yeah, no, like totally as a friend. So the four of them go to Seattle, and Hannah and Fox bond a lot and go to the record expo together. Super cute. And when Piper asks about it, she tells her that she likes him as a friend, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Because she has a longtime crush on her boss, Sergey, back in LA, who has never given her the time of day in her life. She has high hopes for it, though. It's things are really looking up for her. So she views she views her relationship with Fox as platonic. She views her Fox as platonic.
Yeah, he's foxy, but it's platonic.
He's very foxy. I'm dying.
So Piper and Brendan are together and like chatting. They're actually kind of doing their own thing while Fox and Hannah are hanging out. And she gets like this overwhelming urge to admit to him that she loves him. And again, it's been like a month, but no judgment. Anyway, her phone rings and it's a friend from LA. It's actually the same friend that like sold her out to the police after the rooftop party. She's like, where have you been? I miss you. And she's like, everyone's talking about you being gone. Like, we're going to throw a giant party when you return. Piper is like, not really interested in that anymore. But when Brendan asks about it, she gets avoidant because she doesn't want to talk about LA yet. He calls her out on it and they argue a little bit, which just turns into them having sex again, which is super healthy for them. I love that. They really also, good. After like banging, admit that they're both in love with each other. So it's very,
very so like healthy. We're just gonna push aside these other feelings.
They're like, let's table that.
Totally fine. Totally fine. After heading back on over to good old Westport after Seattle, Hannah actually suggests that they just stay at Brendan's place instead of the shabby apartment. And she's like, if he doesn't mind, let's just move on in.
I would love to get out of this bunk bed if we could.
I would love nothing more than to move into this man's house. And that she will even take the guest room so that Piper can, hit it with Brendan. What a queen.
What a queen. What a sacrifice.
Like, that is so sacrificial of you.
She's like, please, I have to get out of this one-room studio apartment with my sister before I
cannot take it. Hannah is thrilled with this new arrangement when she finds out that Brendan has like a super sick vintage record player, and the three of them continue to work on the bar. And when they finish everything up, they name it Cross and Daughters. Very cute. And Piper is so happy that she tells Hannah she plans to stay in Westport with Brendan. Brendan doesn't know that yet, but she is going to stay forever.
It was just like girl talk between sisters. Why would she tell him that? Like,
they have never had like an important conversation in their entire lives. So
no, and whenever they try to, they just end up fucking.
It's fine.
Piper gets a call from her stepdad who wants to make sure the grand opening of the bar is still on because he's like, well, Piper, you're not the most reliable person. And so Brendan's like, wait, you want him to come be impressed by your hard work so you can go back to LA early. And Piper's like, okay, well, originally that was the plan, but like I did forget about that because I was having so much fun with you. And he's like, okay, I don't believe you. You're just taking this plan as a safety net in case things don't work out between us, which is perfectly fine for her.
Yeah, that's like a valid, like she doesn't know you.
Been a couple months. And so Brendan's like, look, I think you need some space tonight to just like think about what you want. Honestly, I do feel like he was trying to be mature, but I do think he kind of went about it the wrong way. But I see where he was coming from. He was like, I'm going to like leave for the night so like you can have some space. And the next morning he was leaving for a fishing trip. So he's like, if you do want to like be with me, like just come see me off at the dock. If not, just you don't need to show up. It's cool. And it was like I could see where he was coming from, but it was a little bit immature.
Again, it's like you are getting ready to leave for like an extended amount of time. So like that may not have been the move. I don't know. The whole thing seemed very strange to me. But the next morning, Piper wakes up mad about what happened, and she knows that she wants to be with Brendan either way, though. Like she still loves him, and so she goes to walk Abe to the museum, but he falls and hits his head. Poor
baby.
And she calls for help and waits with Abe, and then she tries to call Brendan's phone, but it goes to voicemail, and she's like, fuck. I have missed it. I've missed the time. He thinks I'm not going to show up. And so she sprints to the harbor, but the Della Rey has already left and she sobs knowing that Brendan thinks she didn't choose him. And then someone's bitch ass wife was like, yeah, like that's just the way that it is. Like you just aren't cut out for this. And I'm like, girl.
She's like, don't cry. You got to be tougher than that. Like, bitch.
Yeah, like, I'm sorry. Who are you?
Totally uncalled for. The sisters have their opening night for Crossing Daughters the same day that the Della Rey is scheduled to return from said fishing trip. Their stepdad did cancel on them, which they're like, damn, kind of saw
He's
that
like, Piper,
coming.
you're so unreliable. And then he cancels.
Yeah. And then he cancels. Yeah. And so, okay, right when they first open, Mick is the only person who shows up, which is super awkward because she has not seen him since the hospital. And he basically tells her, like, it's okay, you're just not meant for a place like Westport, and kind of like implies that she'll never measure up to Desiree. And so Piper is, of course, like really sad and feeling out of place. And Hannah's like, look, just go back to LA for your big party. Like, I'll take care of the bar for tonight. Like, no big deal.
Yeah, no one's here, so it's fine.
Yeah, she's like, I think I can manage one customer. Like, go on.
So Brendan finally, gets close enough to land and starts receiving all of Piper's messages. And he's like, oh shit, okay, that sucks. And so then he goes to Crossing Daughters, and there's like a shit ton of customers, and Hannah is like crying at the bar. And so Fox is like, don't worry, babe, like I'm coming to save you, like I will help. And he is like, Hannah, where is Piper? Like, what is happening? And she tells him what happened and that she has gone back to LA. And he is like, I gotta go get my girl. And Mick approaches Brendan and asks him to apologize for him when he sees her because he was a dick. Yeah. And he's like, I didn't handle that well and I wasn't kind to her. And so Brendan finds like some closure with him about moving on. They like kind of have like a special moment-ish together. I don't know. Mick kind of sucks, but
yeah. I get where his feelings were coming from,
but they have like a little bit of closure, and he's like, yeah, go get your girl. And so he does.
So back in LA, Piper is having a really bad time at her party. She's
having like not a good time.
I actually don't want to be here. Like, I want to be back in Westport. And she calls Brendan's arms the recharging station, which I think is cute. She's like, I want to be back in the recharging station, which is someone who has like physical touch as a love, like one of my top love languages.
I get it.
I just want to hug right now. So she actually looks into the crowd and sees Brendan there, and she's like, oh my God, am I hallucinating? So she takes off running to him. They apologize to each other and explain all of their miscommunications. They're like, I want to be with you. I want to be with you. And so Brendan's like, yeah. And like, after we left, Crossing Daughters was actually packed on opening night, which makes Piper feel really proud and like better about what happened.
That part always reminds me of like Legally Blonde, where Ella's like, I'm sorry, am I having glue right now?
She is such an L too.
She is an L for sure. So 1 week later, this is actually the epilogue to this story. 1 week later, because they don't get a happily ever after, I guess, in this book. Brendan is coming back from a fishing trip, but Hannah is returning to LA. And so Hannah opens the front door to Brendan's home and finds a Fleetwood Mac album that she had wanted to buy at the expo in Seattle, but like they didn't have the money at the time because they're putting everything into Crossing Daughters. And she realizes that Fox bought it for her. How cute. The epilogue ends with Piper going down to the dock to wait for Brendan's return. It kind of gave me some like Gatsby-ish vibes with the boats continuing sailing or whatever. And that's how the story ends.
It's like, ooh, mysterious.
Yeah, so waiting for her sailor to come ashore.
There's actually a bonus scene as well. And the bonus scene follows Hannah and Fox during their time at the record store, which is called Disc and Dat. So it's that time that Brendan and Piper went to go have dinner after Piper set dinner on fire. So it's from Fox's perspective, and he's super attracted to Hannah, but like he knows that they can only be friends because she's the little sister of Brendan's like serious, like
as serious as you can be after 3 weeks, girlfriend.
Yeah, like they're not actually dating at this point in the story, but he knows that Brendan's interested in her. So he's like, I know like I have a bad reputation and I need to just be friends with her. But they spend the evening getting to know each other, and Fox is like, damn, she's cute, but he's like, no, I gotta remind myself that like she's off limits. But that's kind of the vibes.
And that kind of sets it up for book 2 in the Bellinger sister series.
Yep, hook, line, and sinker, which
Hook,
we'll
line,
be
and sinker.
covering in 2 weeks.
Yes. But that kind of wraps up the synopsis for the story. So go ahead and jump over to part 2, where we actually talk a little bit more about the story itself. We break down the characters and our general feelings about it.
Join us for part 2, and as always,
Let's get lit.